Before we finally export our master, we've really got one step of processing to perform, and that is brick wall limiting, or maximization as some people like to call it. And what we're doing here are really a couple of things. We're trying to boost the perceived volume, and this is achieved by reducing dynamic range. So really the same as a compressor, and ultimately a limiter is a compressor, just over a 10-to-1 ratio. And by reducing the dynamic range in such a way, we're increasing perceived volume, reducing the difference between the loud parts and the quiet parts of our track, and making the human ear think that it's louder than it really is. And another thing we're doing is putting a brick wall or a peak there that's very, very strict and won't allow the level to go over. And this ensures that we're not getting any clipping. And the two things hand in hand can produce really extreme effects, really extreme volume enhancing effects. So you've got to be pretty careful. With this more than most of the processes in your mastering chain, I've said all the way along you've got to be quite careful, because you can end up colouring your mix with too much EQ, or you can end up making things not so compatible on mono systems with stereo enhancement, or make things sound a little crunchy with too much compression. But if you apply too much limiting or maximization, you can actually completely wreck the master and can reduce the dynamic range to a point where you're approaching white noise. And you really don't want this. So let's take a look at a few ways that you can ensure that you don't go over the top with this process, but you achieve a nice punchy full sound. So I've got the M-Class Maximizer here at the very end of our chain, and I've bypassed the stereo enhancement, and I've just left some of the light EQ work that we've done and some of the light compression from the M-Class compressor. And we've also got the SSL bus compressor on the console. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Well, we've got a master output level here, which is going to be where you're going to be watching all the time, and I've got it in peak mode. I've also got the soft clip mode on and turned it down to 0. This just means that if you do get any clipping, it's not going to allow it to go over, but you're going to get like an analog clipping mode, much like a tape machine. So we'll get a nice analog warmth if things go over, but we won't actually get any overs. I also want the attack and release on, say, mid and slow or slow and slow. And the 4 milliseconds look ahead just ensures that there's no faults or overs coming up, but it will add a little latency. So don't have this applied if you're still tracking or adding instruments. Obviously we want this on because we want the limiter on, and then we want to start watching the gain reduction. And the gain reduction is applied by driving level into the limiter. And as we do so, you can see the gain reduction being applied just as you would in a compressor, and we can see the output level increasing. We're not getting any overs, but our dynamic range is being reduced. If I turn the limiter off, or bypass the whole thing, in fact, let's keep it on, but turn the level down so we can still see the dynamic range on the meter. You can see there's a lot more movement here. We're not getting up to 0, but there's a lot of movement. Let me get it into a part where the drums are. Okay. As I start to drive level into the limiter, we get closer to 0, and I increase the pressure. Now if I push things too far, and let me up the output level on the compressor here, and we're getting to about 5 or 6 decibels of gain reduction here. You can see we're getting less and less movement up towards the top, until eventually you'll get next to no movement up around 10 to 12 dB. You can hear it sort of sounds like distortion, white noise, not very nice. So we want to watch our signal path and dial it right down until we're hitting the 0, but we've got about 2 or 3 decibels of gain reduction. Now there's no hard and fast rule here, but really 2 or 3 dB of gain reduction is enough. And you can get a good idea by taking a look at the big meter here. Like, we still want some movement up at the top, and we still want a couple of decibels of headroom. It doesn't matter if it's peaking at 0. If you want to take it slightly off 0, by the way, you can hit shift and bring the output ceiling or the output gain down to, say, 0.1. I'm just going to dial. You've got to be pretty careful. or 0.2. But just below 0 is fine. And then reset this and you'll ensure there's absolutely no clipping. And for the minute, I'm going to put it back onto 0. There we go. And I think that's probably still a little bit too much. We take it away, bypass it, you can hear the difference. We're gaining a lot of volume. Now, if you want to try something else, you can try a different maximizer now. There's a new limiter in town, and let's just select the maximizer here and create a new studio effects here. And it's the Ozone Maximizer. And this is from iZotope, and this is actually from the Ozone suite. Some of you may have used this, and it's got dithering built in. Now, I'm just going to use the actual dithering that's built into Reason, but if you like, you can dither here. So we've talked about dithering in the last chapter, but you can go down to 16-bit and you can choose your noise shaping, light, moderate, medium. You can choose the dither amount. And this is really great because it's pro quality dithering, and we can limit the peaks, harmonic suppress. I mean, there's plenty of options here. When talking about options, you can switch it on here, by the way, switch it on and off with this button. But talking about options, we've got a lot of options when it comes to the actual limiting. And we can have the margin set to 0.1, and that allows us to be just under the ceiling of 0. So it's a little bit more of a professional feeling sort of limiter. We've got a speed here. We've attack and release, both attack and release in the M-Class Maximizer, but this is an overall speed character knob and a stereo link. We're going to leave that on full link. And then we've got hard, soft, IRC1, IRC2. So you can play around with these different modes to see which mode you prefer, which sort of character you prefer. I tend to just leave it on the first mode. But then we can bring the threshold down, and this is really the main control. And we've got a much better metering system. Let me bypass this maximizer. And you can see that it's a bit more sensitive. So we're looking for about -2 to -3 dB. And I prefer the sound of this, you know. I think you can get more volume with less gain reduction. It's a little warmer to my ears, you know. Plus we've got more options, and I think the metering is slightly better. The gain reduction meter here, I'm not a huge fan of it. I wish that they'd make it, you know, a little longer. I much prefer this. It gives you a much better idea. And you can slow it down if you feel that the release is a little too fast. Check the big meter. That sounds pretty good to me. So it's this sort of attention to detail when it comes to the final limiting that will allow you to get as much volume as you can out of your master, but at the same time, try and retain the dynamics and original character of the whole thing. So with that in mind and the whole mastering chain complete, let's have a think about how you're going to export it, how you're going to convert it into different formats, and how you're going to finally deliver the master. And that's what we'll look at in the next tutorial.